The river was screaming that morning. It roared louder than the wind, louder than fear, louder than reason. Ethan Cole heard it before he saw it, a violent, furious sound tearing through the canyon, as if the earth itself had split open. He had crossed this river 100 times in his life, guiding cattle, carrying supplies, testing his strength against its moods. But today was different. Today the river sounded alive and angry. As he rode closer, rain cutting his face like small knives, something massive moved against the current. At first, he thought it was a fallen tree. Then the shape lifted an arm, and he realized it was a woman being dragged toward the rocks. She was enormous, taller than any woman he had ever seen, her dark hair plastered to her face. Her body slammed again and again against the jagged stones. The river tried to swallow her whole. Ethan didn't stop to think. He didn't weigh the danger or calculate his chances. He only knew one thing. If he didn't act now, she would die. He tied his horse to a tree, stripped off his coat, and plunged into the freezing water. The current nearly took his legs out from under him. Every step felt like wrestling a wild animal. When he reached her, he saw her eyes fierce, terrified, still fighting. She struck at him weakly, thinking he was another threat. But he grabbed her wrist and shouted over the roar, telling her he was trying to help. Somehow, with a strength he didn't know he had, he dragged her toward a shallow bend and pulled her onto the muddy bank. She collapsed there, chest heaving, coughing water and blood. Up close she looked even larger, broad shoulders, powerful arms, muscles earned from a hard life. Her skin was marked with scars, not ugly ones, but stories, written into flesh. She was Apache. Ethan knew it instantly. And he also knew what that meant. This land was dangerous for a man like him, and dangerous for her in different ways. For a moment, he wondered if saving her had been a mistake. But when she finally caught her breath and looked at him again, her eyes softened. She spoke in broken English, her voice low but steady. "You pulled me back from the river." He nodded. "Didn't feel right leaving you there." Her name was Naya. She had been crossing the river to warn her people of approaching soldiers when the floodwaters rose faster than she expected. The storm had turned the crossing into a death trap, though it barely fit over her shoulders and helped her sit up. She winced, clearly injured, but refused to complain. Pride ran through her like blood. He offered to take her to his cabin to rest. She hesitated, studying him as if weighing his soul, then agreed. She had no strength left to argue. The journey to the cabin was slow. Naya's weight leaned heavily against him, and every step reminded Ethan how fragile a single decision could be. At the cabin, he cleaned her wounds, his hands shaking not from fear but from the realization of how close she had come to dying. She watched him carefully, alert even in pain. Over the next hours, the storm passed, and silence settled around them. In that quiet, they spoke. Naya told him about her people, about her father Talbert, a leader, respected for his wisdom and feared for his strength. She told him that Talbert believed every debt must be repaid, good or bad. Ethan listened, uneasy. He hadn't saved her for a reward. He hadn't even thought of consequences. By morning, Naya was strong enough to stand. She insisted on returning to her people. Ethan offered to escort her part of the way, knowing the risk. When they reached the edge of Apache territory, she stopped and faced him. "My father will come," she said. "He will want to see the man who pulled his daughter from death." Ethan felt a knot tighten in his chest. Stories of Apache warriors filled his mind, stories of revenge, of blood, debts paid in full. Still, he nodded. "Tell him I didn't do it for anything," he said. Najee smiled faintly. "That is why he will come." 2 days later they arrived. The ground trembled beneath the hooves of dozens of horses. Warriors emerged like shadows from the hills, their presence heavy and silent. At the front rode tall, Bear. He was even larger than his daughter, his face carved with age and authority. His eyes locked onto Ethan with a gaze that felt like it could strip a man bare. Ethan stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to run. Talbert dismounted and approached. The warriors watched, hands near their weapons. Naya stepped forward and spoke in her language, her voice strong despite her injuries. Told the story of the river, of the man who risked his life for hers. Tall Bear listened without interruption. When she finished, he turned to Ethan. Silence stretched between them like a blade. You stepped into the river knowing it could kill. You, Tall Bear said finally. His English was slow but clear. Ethan swallowed. Yes, you did not know who she was. No, you did not ask for payment. Ethan shook his head. I just did what anyone should. Tall Bear studied him for a long time. Then something unexpected happened. The great Apache leader placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head. A murmur rippled through the warriors. A life for a life, Tall Bear said. You saved my daughter. You saved the future of my blood. I do not give gold for such a thing. He turned and gestured. 2 warriors brought forward a chest, but instead of opening it, Tall Bear waved them away. This reward is not metal, he continued. It is protection. He explained that Ethan's land lay in a dangerous place, between expanding settlements. In tribal paths, conflict would come. Blood would be spilled. But from this day forward, Tall Bear declared, no Apache warrior would harm Ethan or his home. More than that, if danger came from others, the Apache would warn him. It would stand between him and death, as he had stood between Naya and the river. Ethan was stunned. He had expected nothing or worse. He looked at Naya, who nodded, her eyes shining. Tall Bear stepped closer and placed a carved stone into Ethan's hand, etched with symbols of the river and the bear. Show this, he said, and my people will know you. Over the following months, Ethan learned the true weight of that reward. Raiders avoided his land. Soldiers passed without incident. When drought came, Apache scouts warned him early, allowing him to move his cattle, and sometimes Naya visited. She brought stories, laughter, and a strength that matched the land itself. They spoke of the river often, of how a single moment can change everything. Years later, when Ethan was old and the river roared again after another storm, he stood on its bank and remembered the day he chose to step into danger for a stranger. He understood then that the greatest rewards are never what we expect. They are not coins or praise, but the quiet knowledge that one act of courage can ripple outward, changing lives far beyond the moment it was made. The river still screamed, wild and untamed, but in its voice, Ethan no longer heard fear. He heard the echo of a choice and the power of humanity that flows stronger than any storm.